This is CheloniaCast, episode 80. Today we are joined by Chase Pirtle and Brent Fannin to have a great conversation about their documentary film, Gopher Games, The Fight to Save the Heart of Florida. Chase is the director of Ashton Biological Preserve and the co-founder of the Rattlesnake Conservancy. He's worked in many different states across the U.S. on wildlife research and preservation. At Ashton, he serves many different roles, managing the preserve's nearly 100 acres, taking care of all of the animals on the preserve and all the logistics. So he's just an incredible person. Excited to talk to him. Brett Fannin is a person of many different talents. He's an award-winning documentary filmmaker. He's a conservationist, a drone pilot, an educator, a lot of things. He's the founder of Golden Hawk Drones, where he works on aerial, videographic, and photographic consulting projects. He's also the director of the Gopher Games films that we're going to talk about, and the Water State, which was another one of his big projects on the Florida Springs. We're really excited to talk to Chase and Brent today about Gopher Tortoises, Gopher Tortoise conservation, what it was like to make their film Gopher Games, what they learned in the process. So thanks for joining us, guys.
Sure.
All right. Well, Paul, do you want to kick us off with our
Yeah,
go-to?
sure. All right. So we always open the same way. So I guess it's just, why turtles? And I guess in this case, we could say, why gopher tortoises? Kind of what brought you into an interest in turtles or tortoises specifically, Um,
Yeah, I guess I'll jump in since Chase seems to have disappeared for a moment.
Start.
Um,
There we go.
I think I'd have to probably. I mean, I've loved animals most of my life, but I got to attribute my reptile affinity for my uncle. His name's Sean Heflick. He's a herpetologist over in Palm Bay, and when I moved to Florida about 12 years ago from Indiana, and I wanted to work with animals, but like you can't just jump into a zookeeping job. So I started working with a friend of his doing alligator stuff and crocodiles. So I was an alligator wrestler for a hot second, but you can't really be a part of that community without being deeply a part of that community. So I got to learn a lot about a lot of different reptiles, and over the years I've worked with many different species. And tortoises are just awesome, and gopher tortoises specifically I like because they're. I know we'll talk about it later, but they're a keystone species. So they're not. They don't just do their thing and have a good time. They like in certain places sustain the ecosystem, or they protect the ecosystem in a way. So yeah, they're cute and they're weird and funny, but they're also like really integral to the ecosystem around Florida and the Southeast in general.
Right, right. That's a huge part of it. I mean, maybe we can just jump into the to Gopher Games. I mean, we want to highlight a lot of that. How did the idea for this film come together? How did you and Chase kind of converge on this? What was that the early stages like?
Well, I started it. So Chase, oh man, I'm trying to think of that meme. The Kool-Aid guy who crashes through the wall. He's like, "Oh yeah." So I started the documentary because I needed something to do. To be honest, I graduated into the recession in '08 with a film degree, but I didn't use it. So I worked as an animal trainer for years, and I then just a few years ago I got a grant to make the water state, and so that ended up like sparking that fire again that I had, back in college 15 years ago. So I finished that project and it was amazing and I loved it and I wanted to do it again. But I didn't know what to do a documentary on, so I started just googling whatever I could find. And I worked at that point in the College of Journalism, so like there's constantly conservation based articles coming my way. So I think if I gotta thank Craig Pittman for this. He's a writer out of Tampa, and he writes satirical. Well, I don't know if they're satirical, but really kind of savage articles about the terrible things that happen in Florida to conservation. And turtles, I kept clicking and clicking and clicking, and I could not stop finding gopher tortoise articles. But at the same time, I couldn't find anything about good things that were happening for gopher tortoises. So I talked to some random people in the building, and they started throwing names at me of people I needed to talk to, and Chase's name kept coming up. And so I finally called Chase to be like, look, I'm working on this project. I don't even know if it's going to happen because I don't have any money, but I think it really needs to. And what do you think? And it's like he grabbed me by the shoulders almost and it's like pulled me through the phone and like, let's do it. We have to do it. And yeah, Chase is definitely, thank you, Chase, if I haven't already. He did a huge amount for us as a producer. I don't think this film would have happened if it wasn't for him, his knowledge and expertise, because he's been doing it for a decade and I had just been Googling it for a week. So yeah, that's kind of how we got started. I just needed a project. I really wanted to make a difference with it. And Gopher Tortoises seemed like they really needed help. And then when I called Chase, he confirmed that quite enthusiastically.
That's awesome. Chase, what were you thinking when Brent called you up? I mean, what was that initial excitement about the film? Like what was that early spark? You know, how did that feel?
Oh, it felt great. It felt great, and somebody that actually wanted to do the real story, the true story, just not, it's like a lot of the documentaries you see on, the various channels. It's about, with the millions of species on the planet, but they hit on the elephant, the lion, the tiger, the bear, because it's guaranteed to bring in views and kind of, they don't, you know, I don't know, really go in behind the scenes with a lot of the, you know issues and everything else. So when Brent explained, hey, this just isn't your typical documentary, like, the Gopher tortoise goes in the burrow, comes out the burrow, this is the significance it holds, that's, has been stated and stated, which is great. I mean, any documentary touching base and giving public awareness to any, species or individual animal is great. But, these ones are the ones that are really needed, especially in today's world where, we're at the make it or break it state. So when he, explained that, that is what that is where the documentary was going to be geared, it upped my excitement even more. And then when it really hit me is when I saw the first trailer, and I'm not going to lie, a tear rolled down my cheek because it was so to the point and hard hitting, in my opinion. And that's when it, I guess, kind of really became a reality that this is happening, and it's going to happen to where, to a degree that, thousands of people can see it, instead of me just, from PowerPoint presentation with 30, 40 people to tour, with 10, 15 people. It's on a magnitude that I could not reach myself previously.
And so when you guys were first, I mean, I've messed around with the YouTube stuff in the past and nothing serious like a documentary. I can't imagine the amount of work that goes into something like this. But in those early stages, I mean, what were some of the first hurdles that you came to and how did you overcome those?
Hurricane. Honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brent probably can explain that, because I was just one part of the making in that aspect of the video aspect. So yeah, you run with that, Brent.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest hurdles was just financing. Like, you can't really make a documentary for free, uh, and we needed at least base level cash to do the traveling and to pay people. We ended up crowdfunding about $5,000 on GoFundMe, but that wasn't enough money to pay people. So what was crazy is, as I started just talking to people and talking to people around my building at UF, people started offering their time. And I had the two guys that did the filming, three actually, and they all donated their time with their cameras and their expertise. And and they're also award-winning filmmakers, and that was crazy that they were willing to do that. So in the end, nobody got paid. All of us volunteered all of our time, but we were able to pay for like our hotels and the week of filming and food and everything. So I think the biggest hurdle was just uh, for the funding. But we also, I guess I could hope we don't come up with this question later, and I'm ruining it now. But uh, we didn't have everything we needed to actually finish the documentary. For example, I made the first trailer that Chase saw without filming. Like, we didn't go anywhere. I just pulled clips from the Florida archives and slapped it together. But what we did do is, as I started to put these trailers out there before we ever filmed at all, people started to message me on Instagram and Facebook and say, like, can we help? Can we donate photos? Can I donate video? Can I take my drone up and film the habitat that you're looking for? And it was wild to see the community, just like Chase did, come out and be like, we need to make this. This has to be done. Here, whatever I can do, I'll do it. So that hurdle was, I did not know how we were going to get all the content we needed. And it was wild to have people reach out and just give it to me for free. So yeah, it was, I think another hardest part is I ended up moving to Atlanta before we filmed. So I had to come down here and then we had to do the full trek around. We did like 5 cities in 3 days, interviewing everybody. And that was a wild adventure. But yeah, the hurdles were surprisingly, I mean, they were there, they were pretty large, but we surpassed them easily, which I did not expect. Big kudos to Chase because he did a lot of that fundraising.
Yeah, that's a really awesome collaboration. I guess if we want to, talk about maybe the film itself in some capacity, I think we're all familiar to some extent with the plight of Gopher Tortoises. But what would you say the objective is for, like someone watching this movie? What do you want them to take away from it?
I'll give that one to you, Chase.
Kind of just the state that the natural world's in. Because with FWC, it's always I had a buddy say it really almost perfect one time. He says FWC always talks about how much they've done, but never how much we have to do. And so I think that documentary kind of put it into perspective, the state of the natural world within Florida, and showed kind of the horrendousness behind getting there, and then also gave an outlet kind of at the end on ways to get involved to create change. And so what we're hoping, or me at least, people take away is to be proactive and to get involved and help be part of that change.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I think that's kind of like it's definitely different because you're trying to reach such a wide audience. It's very different trying to consult with other people who are passionate about turtles, about maybe nuanced forms of conservation. But the bigger picture is you need everyday people to care in some capacity, and that's obviously what's going to be most effective.
People protect what they love, and if they don't know there's a problem, they're not going to help.
Right. I recently did this presentation at the University of Georgia on this project we're working on, looking at the diversity of turtles within the southeastern United States. And not a lot of people realize, but the state of Alabama has almost more turtles than any country. There are only 4 countries that have more turtles than just Alabama. And Georgia, Florida, they're up on that list. And it was just really interesting to talk to all of these scientists at this poster presentation about, like, how do we make this relevant to people? These are incredible numbers, but it seems like not a lot of people know about this, and most of them didn't know. But it's just really interesting to me how few people think about documentary film as a way to bring the conservation to everybody. And it's really cool what you guys have done in that way, like bringing the science to the broader public, because that's what really makes the change.
Yeah, look at Steve Irwin. I mean, a zookeeper that was on the weeks for 2 weeks, news worldwide 2 weeks after his passing. That's pretty significant.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it is. Something about Gopher Games in particular. I mean, the aerial shots are just, and the aerial shots of the actual habitat, but also the change over time of Florida. I mean, those are some of the things that stand out from the film to me. And Brent, I think you kind of touched on this, but look, what was it like to get those shots? How did you bring in your background in drone videography to doing this?
Well, just like a lot of parts of the film, we had people donate their time for that. So I got a shout out to Shivam Shukla. I hope I'm saying his name right. I haven't met him in person. He did quite a bit just threw his dad's drone up and got some good shots of Ashton Biological Preserve and whatnot. So as far as like the aerial shots, are you talking about the one where it like dissolves from an old photo into the satellite shot?
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that, and just the change over time in Florida, and there's like one of the I think it's one of the highways, and you can just, I mean, you see the habitat around it. It's like really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll admit my sin. That was stock footage because I was up here in Atlanta and I needed that shot, and I didn't have time to reach out to somebody and just wait for them to try to get it when they could. So I did pull a few shots from stock footage websites. Not very many, but that was one with the highway running right through the habitats. Um, as far as like the zoom out, the satellite stuff, that kind of tracks back to like what we want people to take away from this documentary. And I was really encouraged when we started making the doc to find that it wasn't just Chase that was wildly in love with these tortoises, but tons of people in Florida were. And so that hurdle was already passed, right? Like people do care, but they didn't know. And so I wanted them to walk away with tears in their eyes, be like, this cute little thingy that I love is dying. And I think one of the best ways to show that, obviously, I didn't have footage of a tortoise dying, uh, and I did get some pretty nasty shots from public records requests of people that had done terrible things to tortoises, but I didn't want to put that on there. So the next best thing was to simulate that they were underground and potentially being entombed, and to show to show the actual change that has happened over time. And so I spent hours, literal hours, going through tons and tons of the Florida Archive website and just downloading them. And then I spent even more hours going into Google Earth Studio, which was new at the time, and I was able to get beta access. And then I spent hours lining up those shots. And in Florida, like if you live in Florida and you're listening to this podcast, or really anywhere that's well developed, go to Google Earth time lapse, and you'll be able to look back into the 1980s to now of the change in development. And if you go anywhere in Florida, it is staggering. I had maybe another half a dozen shots that I did not even put in the documentary that were crazy. So that was just one of the ways that we just really wanted to make sure that visually you can see that there is a massive problem. And if you go to a Walmart, you'd be like, well, this probably used to have trees, but then you can see it if you show it in that satellite shot. So the hours that I spent doing that, I think were well worth it, because it's just, at least for me, I get teared up every time I look at that part.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even stock footage, I mean, that's still a lot of work. You know, you have to find the right thing and how to cut it and just make sure everything works and it comes together. I mean, it did that. Um, yeah, I mean, that's so when it comes to just in the early kind of days of doing the film, I mean, who are some of the other you mentioned Craig Pittman, but who are some of the scientists and who are some of the people that, and maybe the documents, the research you did, what were the things that stood out to you the most? I guess for both of you guys.
You want to take that one first, Chase?
You mean the people coming to play to make this happen?
Yeah, I just mean the people that have done work with gopher tortoises that kind of have that inspired the maybe the conservation the issue that we're in right now that have portrayed that. I mean, yeah,
Oh yeah, you have the Ray Ashton, of course. Joe Barish. There's a bunch of folks out there that have been pushing the Gopher Tours for a long time. In terms of conservation, the whole nine yards. I mean, either doing research work on them, entombment studies, to reproductive studies throughout the range. Because I mean, Gopher Tortoise in South Florida, probably has a whole different, functionality than one in South Carolina that goes, from no hibernation to full blown hibernation. So Hoffenberg, there's been, I'm hesitant to say names because I'm nervous I'll leave somebody out, because, there's been quite a
yeah,
few professionals that have worked on the tortoises. But, Ray Ashton, he focused a lot on the Gopher tortoise, and not just like like research work. They wrote the management book. It's like, yeah, don't get me wrong, I love the Gopher tortoise, but like 300-400 pages on one species can can get a bit in depth. But it's a fantastic book, though. It goes over management, but they wrote the management book, and they also wrote the curriculum for the relocation program, and it's been updated now. So it's changed a bit since then, but the original curriculum for relocation, that was the Ashtons and the state working together to make it happen. And then what was also neat to me is even, Peter mentioned this on the previous podcast, but it's where David Attenborough came to, when he filmed the series Life in Cold Blood, when he went over the Gopher Tortoise, he was on the preserve. So it's kind of fitting that, um, we're still involved 20 years later on the front lines, as Ray was back then.
Right. That's awesome. That's someone, David Attenborough, like Wyatt has advocated for even trying to get him on the podcast. I mean, that maybe, yeah, that would be, it's a really cool
He
idea.
only does handwritten letters, or he doesn't do email or anything else. So you got to handwrite him when you to get in touch with him or his promotion manager.
Well, that's a good tip. That's, there you go. Yeah. Well, okay. So in terms of maybe we could just take a step back in general. I mean, why is it? I think this will provide a good kind of segue into, the specifics of the film, things that we've talked about, maybe how that's changed in the past few years, that kind of thing. But why is it that people should care about the Gopher tortoises? I know we talked about this a little bit with Peter, but it's always interesting just to hear everyone's perspective. Like, why do they matter, right?
You probably have more expertise on that one, Chase.
Yeah, I mean, keystone species. It's anybody who's engulfed in the animal world. Especially in the southeast, knows that your gopher tortoise is responsible for a lot of the functionality that occurs. It just creates that. It creates that safe haven, that refugia for so many animals to utilize, from hunting to hibernation, and to once again, I know this podcast, a lot of professionals watch it, so I don't know if I need to go into those details exactly. If you like me to, I will, from or I will, from like raising offspring to hunting, once again, to eluding weather. So it's the gopher tortoise is once again an incredible animal, and just like in species, just like all the rest. But that burrow is what makes it so significant and stand out. And whenever I see a gopher tortoise, I'm like, oh yeah, But when I see a burrow, I'm like, oh okay, like there might be a pine snake, there might be an indigo. So it symbolizes life almost, and it's also a passive. Tortoise in general is a kind of a passive reptile. A lot of the public accepts turtles and tortoises better than they do snakes or lizards. So it's kind of one of those animals that you can gain public support for easier than some of the other reptiles that aren't kind of the favorites or whatever. So that's another reason why I like working with the tortoise, because I can engage people into other realms and of the reptile world, simply through the tortoise.
I just thought of an interesting parallel on that note. So if you watch the documentary, there's kind of, if there was an antagonist and a protagonist, the protagonist is the tortoises and the antagonist is the developers. In an odd way, tortoises are developers, but they are developing for 360 plus other species. So they're the developers that we want, because they're the ones that are actually helping the landscape. And if they disappear, the landscape will disappear as well. So as opposed to the other type of developers, if they disappear, everything thrives. So yeah, it's it's just that it's kind of odd to find an animal like that. Like if you kill an animal, it's out of the ecosystem. The food chain is now missing that one little piece. But if you take a gopher tortoise out of the picture, you will lose potentially hundreds of species in a ecosystem.
Right, right. They're just critical. I mean, yeah, and that's part of it too. Is like there's the moral imperative that we've talked about so much on here of we should protect the things that we share the planet with, but there's also the functional sense of like this is really not good. I mean, economically, Florida will suffer immensely if we get rid of these tortoises because like you mentioned, Chase, the functionality of the system could collapse and that could be really bad. And there's a level we don't even know. It's like I think that you said 411 species at least, but how much more that we don't even understand yet relies on these tortoises. That's a scary thing if we lose them. Maybe we could, Brent, like you were saying, the developers they feature heavily in this, and it's a complicated landscape of humans and the interaction with the tortoises that Gopher Games focuses on. But I'm just broadly curious, like why it is that like you said, the antagonist is really the state of Florida, is these developers. Why is it that the commissioners on FWC, that the legislation of Florida is so against it, maybe not against, but they're so much more for the development of habitat than than conserving the habitat? I mean, why is that?
I mean, this answer is going to be based on the facts that I have read, but it's going to be partially my opinion. Florida has got to be one of the most like richest states we have as far as natural resources. So where there's potential profit, there's going to be greedy people, and those greedy people cannot exist without a way around the system unless they're constantly just fighting with law enforcement and hoping not to go to prison. So Chase, you can back me up on this one if you think this is accurate. And I can't remember who gave me this quote. It might have been you, Chase. But essentially, since its inception in the 1970s, the FWC, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, has been it was intended to placate the public and say, hey, we know that there's a problem. It's okay. We'll do something about it. You elected us. We'll do something about it. But in reality, it just made it legal to kill tortoises. And that's been happening since the 1970s. And not to get too much of a tangent, but the Water State documentary that I made was the same thing. There's 50 different positions that the governor chooses around our state to take care of water. Sorry about my dog in the background. 50 different people, and there's no requirement to be qualified. So it has become over the years, the FWC and the water management organizations have all been like, I guess, stepping stones to a political power. So if you want to get in to whatever party is in control it's been the last 30 years, it's been Republicans. If you want to climb that ladder, you take a volunteer position like this. And like Rodney Barreto is an amazing example. He has profited in huge ways from being a developer who makes laws that help developers make killing tortoises legal. And he's done it for more than a decade. And that is why these positions exist. These positions do not exist to save wildlife or to protect our environment. They exist as something that placates the public so that they think something good is happening, when in reality, it's just friends doing friends favors until they're climbing the ladder together. So it's Chase, you can back me up if you feel like it, but that's my opinion, is that they literally just exist for their own profit. And they are another one of the loopholes in our system that just allows bad people to do bad things legally.
Yeah, it's what Brent said. I mean, when you think about it, you know, we go to school, we go to college, we work to get a degree so we can do something properly within society. So why it doesn't make sense that, the people running FWC not only don't have degrees, but like no experience within the natural world whatsoever. So it's almost a front, it seems. So progress, quote unquote, what we call progress, can continue, you know, you know, progressing. And there's a quote I heard on a documentary one time called "Murder on the Lake," and it was, we are destroying so much of value in the name of progress. And FWC's public doctrine is states that their job is to support the ecosystems and ecology for the benefit of the people and economy. But it seems like they're doing that for the immediate right now instead of 50 years down the road, 100 years down the road. And that's, the kind of, not only support for the natural world and the wildlife species, but we need people that are going to think in that way as well, just not tomorrow, but next week, next month, 50 years, 100 years. And with nature, obviously with, growth and everything else, like, if certain areas in Florida reach an old growth state, we'll all be deceased by that point. That'll be 200, 300, 400 years down the road. And so, but what are we doing to make sure that certain areas, that can support functionality can reach these old growth states, for future generations that are going to have, that will have access to a, whether it's symbiotic relationships or, just a visual or, an aspect of something that we can never, we don't have the opportunity to experience in today's world. Because I think the last of the connected long, old growth, uh, you call it, or, old growth system in Florida was, I think, logged in the 1920s in the Panhandle. And that was the last of the extensive, state of it.
I mean, these people want profit, and they want profit like right now. They don't care about sustainability because when the system comes crashing down, they'll be dead. So they don't care. And there's this wild disconnect between reality and fantasy, as if we're not part of the natural world. So it's not that they forget about it; it's they choose to just ignore that fact and do whatever they want.
Right, right. The current climate, I think we'll get into that, but I am curious, just for the sake of kind of reaching backwards. I mean, you highlight in Gopher Games, the tortoises were originally protected to some extent. I think the take was limited and it was regulated in 1972 um, by the state of Florida, and so that was then in 1988. They were fully protected, or that sort of changed, and then by 1991 you can entomb tortoises. And so, like, what is the like? I guess how do the climates, political climates, change over time, or is this all kind of, Brent, as you were saying, just a way to look good as a developer to make a regulation and not really have to follow through on it, but at least it appeases a certain crowd? I mean, what is there? I guess.
I have a theory based on everything that I've read for researching this documentary. But Chase, are you aware like of what the political climate was back then?
Say it one more time.
The political climate in like 1972, we went from doing whatever you want with gopher tortoises. A lot of people ate them and hunted them, to them being initially protected, like you could only kill so many, and then eventually you couldn't kill them at all. It seems to me that, like Michael pointed out, it hasn't always been that these people were using it to this extreme, were using these positions to this extreme to profit for themselves. It must have been at some point an actual necessity to protect these species. I don't know anything other than the news articles that I read from the 1970s, but that hasn't
Yeah,
really.
and it was, I bring this up all the time. I think I brought it up in the last documentary, but like Roger Payne, he has the documentary Life Among Whales, and he kind of, did what Brent did with the whales, is brought it to the public. And when he recorded the whales communicating, and as the public call singing, and then with his music, and sold it to National Geographic. They slipped a copy in each of their magazines and dished it out to all their clientele, and it created arguably the first global conservation movement for whales, or conservation movement in general. And the Whaling Commission started putting the votes in favor of the whales instead of the whalers. And if that did not occur at that time, we would have easily lost 80% of the whale species on the planet. And cool fact, still to this day, there has not been one CD that has sold more copies at once than Roger Payne selling his copy to National Geographic. So that's pretty neat, out of all the musicians out there and everything else. But I think that that needs to happen with the commission here. But in general, I don't really know, because it seemed like we were doing really good with the Endangered Species Act. We were bouncing back a lot of animal, the American alligator, the bald eagle, banning DDT. And this was, happening here, other places within the world at that time frame. A lot of the rest of the world was starting to get caught up in terms of, like, development and, westernization and everything else. But I don't know what happened, what turned, where we just kind of were like, whoa, we need to kind of bypass. And, when they put incidental take permits, when they instituted that within the Endangered Species Act, and then corporate corporate exemptions that pretty much deem the Endangered Species Act, ineffective to a certain degree. So you know, uh, I think Florida's on the front lines of that because with was it 26th, 27th largest state with some of the most the largest diversity in North America, Southwest and the Southeast, and then you have 20, now we're going on 24 million people. That growth was so quick and it happened so fast. I think that, if you think about 75, the highway, that wasn't installed till 1979, I believe. So, Florida's gone through a lot of change very quickly with a lot of moving parts.
I guess just the moral philosophy of the political party in power probably as that shifts, you get kind of a difference in the outlook on the natural world. And I mean, in the early '70s, it was like you said, the ESA is getting enacted. There's a lot of it seems like a lot of focus on biodiversity, wildlife, and then that's kind of shifted over the past 30 or so years. It seems
Yeah,
like.
yeah, and Republicans were the ones who pushed and got the Endangered Species Act, invoked and created more or less. And that's the thing too is it's like been brought into politics, and you can ask Brent that. Um, I was pretty avid on just leaving as many political you know, suggestions of any type out of the documentary, even though it was kind of we're dealing with all the politics, because this isn't a Democrat problem, Republican problem, black, white. I mean, this is an everybody problem. It needs to be an everybody game. So I think, like, when you read a news article on the natural world and they start with like a political gut punch or something, you just lost 50% of the people potentially right there. So I'm for like leaving the natural. I think the natural world should be pulled far out of politics and just because of it's what keeps the monopoly system we've created going.
Yeah, the documentary was not unintentional that we had absolutely not a single thing about politics in it. If you're paying attention in Florida, you would notice that every single one of those people on the FWC commission is, in addition to a developer, they're all Republicans, and they have all donated to the Republican Party. But that does not matter because this problem has been going on through both administrations back and forth. And exactly like Chase said, like this shouldn't be political. It should be about saving the environment, like because it's a necessity to us, all of us, to survive. But instead, politicians have decided that they can sway voters by being anti or pro environment, which is ridiculous, but it works. And so right now, if you stop and think like, whoa, if I want to protect the environment, I better vote Democrat at the state and in federal level. No, it doesn't really matter. At least it shouldn't matter. It is just about somebody told me, he's like, I'm not a Republican or Democrat. I'm green. I'm not red or blue. I'm green because I want money. And so I'd almost guarantee you, if Democrats were in control of Florida for the last 30 years, all of these people on the commission would be Democrats and not Republicans. So uh, I don't even like talking about it because it should not be, but it is. So that's why we made sure our documentary could be watched by anybody, and you would at no point go, "Hold on, um, there's nothing in there about politics," and I think that's the way it should stay.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, right. As you guys said, this is a universal issue. Everyone is affected by this equally, and we should all be trying to do what we can to stem the tide of the destruction. Right. I mean, you guys have spoken about this recently, even on the news. There's a recent this HJR 1625 bill that's been put through by, I guess it was drafted up by Dr. Eskamani. Sure, that's mispronounced, but regardless, she seems like she's doing some good work there. And I'm curious. I mean, this looks like a good thing. Reform at some of these higher levels. I mean, what could that possibly do for gopher tortoises?
Oh my gosh, so much. You said it right. It's Dr. Anna Eskamani. She's a Republican, or she's a representative in Orange County, whatever district I don't know, but in the Orange County area, and for this system is so broken that we just need an overhaul. But it's saying reform the FWC, I think, is much better because you can't just eradicate it and then start something new without a lot of serious problems. But what the bill does is basically fixes the loopholes that these people are using to end up at first on the commission and then to end up completely unqualified on the commission and to end up with a corrupt or like conflict of interest on the commission. So it goes from 7 to 9 people, and every single position, which at the moment it's all chosen by the governor, right? The governor picks whoever in the world he wants. Likely it's just a favor because they've donated to his party, whether he's red or blue, it doesn't matter. And then they don't care. They literally they're not beholden to us. So if you watch some of our posts on Instagram, or in the documentary, you'll see people going and speaking at the public meetings. There's 4 of them per year that the FWC has, and they don't care. They do not give a shit what you think because they're not elected, and doesn't matter how bad they are, they won't get fired by you. So they're able to do whatever they want in their own benefit, and it doesn't matter. It was wild to watch this. There's an issue with a split oak conservation area in Orlando, and it's been a conservation area for quite a while. It was purchased to be a Gopher Tortoise holding area years ago by the FWC, and now the FWC has the power to decide whether or not they're going to demolish half of it and run a toll road through. And so at the commission meeting, there were 42 people, like 40 plus people, and all of them but one were against the toll road going through that conservation area. And they said at the end, "Thank you for your input. We appreciate it." And then they voted for it anyway. And we need to change that. And so the way to do that is to change first of all, who picks each position, whether or not they have to be qualified, which they will if that bill passes. They have to actually, we want to put in like they got to take courses on ethics, no conflict of interest. They can't have donated to any political party uh, above $1,000. So those are all the main points, and it just got on Friday. It just got submitted before the House, and and on Monday it got put into 3 different committees. So it's a long, confusing process as to how the bill will go through the House to eventually to the Senate and then to the governor, or sorry, to the ballot. This would be in the midterms if it happened this time, and it is a long process for a reason because how in depth do you want me to go on this?
I mean, anywhere you want to take it. That's we yeah.
All right, I'll keep the really nitty gritty out of it and just go to the basics. In Florida, the Constitution is the section that holds it holds all the language about how the FWC works. That is not normal. In fact, out of like 50 states, I think it might be just Florida, or it might be 2 or 3 states have that. And the problem with that is that if it's in the Constitution, making a constitutional amendment is really hard to do. It's not just like, here's a bill, let's pass it. Okay, great. It is insanely complex and hard to do. And in Florida, they don't want you to have citizen-led initiative ballots. Like they don't want so it's sometimes when you get to a ballot season or a voting season, there's people have spent millions of dollars on a campaign to get something that they want on the ballot, and that's a citizen initiative. In Florida, it costs millions and millions of dollars to do it. And then at the end, if you win or if you're able to get it on the ballot, you have to hit a 60% threshold to pass it instead of 50%. That again, this year they're trying to add more bills to make it even harder. So it's almost impossible at this point to get anything on the ballot. So that's the first hurdle. And the second one would be the alternative is to push it through the House, the Senate, and sometimes the governor's desk as a constitutional amendment. But in Florida, in any state, it's really hard to change the Constitution versus just adding things, tacked on to other things that are, bylaws and whatnot. So it's it's almost impossible. And somehow we got the bill in, but I am not confident that we'll get it on the ballot in midterms because it was put in by a person who is not in the major party, and so the party in control will probably shoot it down. Uh, but It's a wildly complex process, and they've intentionally made it almost impossible to get things to change. So that's why it has to go this way. We can't just sign a petition, vote for this and that. We have to go through a wildly expensive process. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, that's really frustrating. I mean, I guess you could say that at least it raises awareness for it, but how much awareness matters if the people in charge just shoot kind of anything down.
Yeah, they
That's
don't
yeah,
represent us. They don't represent us at all, and that's what
right.
this bill is trying to change.
Right, right. Well, that's really frustrating. I mean, right. It's good to know at least there are initiatives out there addressing the issue with with the higher level of how things are kind of organized and who listens. But with the gopher tortoises in particular, this entombment practice started in 1991. And as I understand it, as a developer, you could get this ITP, the incidental take permit, as you've mentioned, and essentially just bury a tortoise alive. And there were thousands of these issued. I mean, and so that is it just really seems really inhumane. But then so that changed around 2008, and that process was turned into a relocation process. But yeah, maybe if you guys could just kind of, why did they change that ITP program? How has that carried over into today? You focused on this a little in the documentary, but I'm curious, like, what did you learn about that maybe in making Gopher Games?
It's all you, Chase.
So, I was a instructor for authorized Gopher Tortoise agent for a few years, and I didn't even know about this till after the fact. And when I found out about it, I was just like wowed at the history, the dark history to it. And shout out to Carissa Kent. She's another individual that's very proactive and has a lot to do with. She got, I believe it's called, I could be incorrect with this, the Humane Act passed through FWC years ago. And that helped her be able to like relocate I believe, incidental take permits, tortoises that land under incidental take permits to recipient sites. A lot of those I think are like Eglin, like Air Force Base I know a place where they'll take the tortoises, the ITP tortoises and stuff. But yeah, so, but like I was talking about before, it was a lot of public pressure that came into play because it is dark. There's no way around that. There's no sugarcoating that entombing these animals that can survive underground 6 months to a year, starving or to death and running out of oxygen is a terrible way for anything to go out. So, and it was banned, but everybody with the incidental take permits uh, are grandfathered in. So I believe in like 2006 the incidental take permits skyrocketed, I believe, by like 85% people obtaining them. That way they can be grandfathered in, still to this day. And still to this day, there's, as Brent stated on the documentary, there are thousands of incidental take permits with who knows how many tortoises landing under those that are, inhabiting those ecosystems. And, with there's agricultural exemptions, so you just have to relocate for commercial gas station, mini mall, housing development, but you don't for agriculture or silviculture or which is crops, cattle, pine trees and rows, monoculture. And they did studies. I believe I forget where it was. I think Georgia potentially. I got to read the paper again, but they actually ran over gopher tortoise burrows with tanks, and they just sat back like, okay, are these guys? How long does it take to dig them out? Are they digging themselves out? Are they staying under? Majority of them dug out, but the research work was a little bit like because they kind of just ran over the burrows and then sat back and watched instead of on a construction site you'll have consistent activity around the clock. Therefore, will that gopher tortoise still dig out within that time frame with activity above the surface? And then all 85% of the tortoises that did dig out abandoned the burrows. So let's say it's a colder month, the tortoises are not in a hibernation brumation state. You collapse that burrow, they abandon it. A cold front hits. wada bing, wada boom, you know? So there's so many just issues surrounding it that's still kind of going on. You're allowed to cut, like, and when I say entomb the tortoises, I want it like when they can dig out sometimes, it's situation dependent. So sometimes they dig their way out of the burrow, but then that can lead to all sorts of other issues as well. Once again, displacement, winter months, more DOR, and then if they do dig out, is it 2 months, 3 months? If you have indigo snakes, or what happens to those other species while still entombed in that burrow, until the tortoise, decides it's going to dig itself out. And so, like, for right now, when you look at agriculture from timbering, how many tortoises are still getting entombed out there or getting displaced and succumbing to predator of the elements because of the lack of protections. And then I've also seen it as well. Well, somebody will go to, like, I can speak on this, like, publicly. We had, like, a site close to us where they caked all the burrows. It was a cold winter. This was early mid-November. And then but left all the pine trees in rows, and that way they can claim agricultural exemption. They ended up trying to subdivide into 20-acre plots, and that fell through. So now they're applying for a recipient site. And with my math, could be off, but potentially 120 tortoises, give or take, on the property. Um, and if all of those were nixed off the property, and you're starting with no baseline population, now this individual that either killed or displaced those tortoises, or that were displaced that led to the death, can make over $700,000 putting the tortoises back on the property as a recipient site. So there's a lot of, corruption, a lot of darkness behind the scenes that we didn't cover in Gopher Games because, one, I can watch David Attenborough's Life of Mammals, Life in Cold Blood 2 times in a day, but your average public, they can't sit through a 45 to an hour and a half documentary, which Brent explained this very well to me. And then all of a sudden you see all these reels coming out, so he nailed it. And then, we had to kind of limit the information we gave folks because this is so foreign to your average person that we just didn't want to, where they would just, you know how it is, like when you're outside the animal world, when you start talking to people in scientific terminology, you lose them a lot of the time because they can't keep up with the conversation. When you're talking about herpers talking to each other, you're just, you're throwing out the scientific terminology, and you flow with the conversation very well, so that was one thing that we were, I know Brent probably was, because Brent's the one that put the entirety of it together. Is just like, okay, and once again, incredible job telling the story. But okay, what do I throw in there? What do I leave out? Just given how broad this topic goes, from the recipient sites to the relocation to all the regulations that are in between and stuff. So
Right. And so these relocation programs, I mean, I mean, it seems, yeah, right. The grandfathered in incidental take permits, that's just a terrible thing. But, that is, they're not being issued currently. And so they transitioned into this relocation program.
it was a positive step.
Yeah, right.
It was a positive
Right.
step.
But it still seems like it's just kind of missing something. It's just now you're moving, you're not killing the tortoise, but you're moving it somewhere. And this isn't like looking through the page where you document a lot of the history on the Gopher Games website. It talks about the FWC management plan that was born out of the shift for the tortoises around the 2010s. And they talk in there, it's been updated since, but about how we need the goals to protect the tortoises going forward, but it says nothing about the habitat. And it just seems like, if you're
Yes.
not protecting the habitat, are we really protecting the tortoises? So what, I mean, is this relocation program? It's been eroded over time. It seems like people are trying to kind of cut down on the size of a site, how much it should cost the developers. Like, what is is this really a good way to fix the problem?
Well, I think it's a perfect example of what I was saying about, like, the lack of intent for sustainability. Like, on its face, the relocation program is ridiculous. You can't just like you said, you can't just continuously destroy habitat and move more and more and more tortoises into a smaller and smaller space. Absolutely insane. Nobody rational will look at that and be like, that's going to last forever. And then the second part is that they didn't do any serious research to see what would happen during the relocation program. And I know Chase has seen this firsthand, right? Like you move something, is it going to take? Is a sick tortoise going to end up sending a disease into hundreds of other tortoises? Like, are they going to try to get back to their original location? Like, what's the sustainability of this program, and what's the effectiveness for the turtles of this program? And like you said, it's a red herring, right? The real problem is the habitat. We need that habitat, and they don't care. There's not even a thought to the habitat. So once again, this entire process, the relocation program and the Gopher Tortoise management plan, is just to placate the public, and then that eroding of the plan itself, which initially was a piece of garbage, the eroding is to make it legal for them to do it. And that, oh god, this makes my blood boil. We showed that clip of them talking about Senator Hudson, who, by the way, is a developer and he's a senator, or was. I don't know if he's still, but he proposed legislation that made it easier to relocate tortoises. And then when they discussed it, whether or not they were going to pass it, they laughed about it and then said, this one's passed. Without question, unanimous. That blew my mind. And it's here in Florida, corruption is legal. They don't even care. Like, you're not in charge of them. You're not going to vote them in or out. They do whatever the hell they want for their buddies. So I think that relocation program is the perfect example of how completely corrupt and worthless this protection system actually is.
Yeah, it's interesting with the relocation stuff. Like, maybe I can't speak to Gopher tortoises, but if you look at any of the work, I think there's been a good amount done on in the same genus, of course, Mojave Desert tortoises with relocation. And it's like a large percentage of them just get picked apart by predators or don't take the burrows, or it just really doesn't seem to work for these animals to move. It seems like they're so home range driven. It's just not an adequate conservation strategy if we really want to save them.
Yeah, and then also you got to think about an animal that can live. I mean, those Gopher tortoise. I think is Gus. I forget he's in like Nova Scotia, out of all places, at a facility. But I think he's like 102. I could be incorrect. 102, 110. I got to look again. But with an animal that lives that long, sometimes the state will be like a lot of these Gopher tortoises too. They're getting taken from pristine habitat and then being moved to silviculture or even agricultural systems that intertwine with patches of endemic growth. And so, like, I tell people all the time, like, I use this example, like, I love macaroni and cheese, but if I just ate macaroni and cheese for 15 years straight, I would have some nutritional issues, no doubt, And when you put these tortoises, in a pasteurized system, or, and not quite an endemic system like they came from, this isn't always the case, of course, and then, put them in a more, you know, um, a system without the diversity, you might not be able to see reproductive issues or nutritional issues for 15, 20 years down the road, just due to how that species works. And like, Gopher tortoise and most tortoise species out there. So, you know, technically, like, on the preserve here, we were one of the first like recipient sites. And I would say at this point, I could be like, yes, it's a success, but at the same time, we live on site. Ray lived on site. So we were, kind of hands-on a little bit more than some of these other recipient sites are, that they got to travel and the whole 9 yards. And when you public request the state for a lot of this information, they don't have success. Or Split Oak, for example. Oh yeah, it's a recipient. Here's a recipient side. Now we're going to put a toll road through the middle of it, and then we're going to mitigate for that. I just did a survey with the Sierra Club, and with Lacucci, and the parcel that I did the mitigation, or the Gopher Tortoise Burrow survey on, was bought to mitigate for a toll road going next to it, and then they wanted a golf course to purchase that, and they were going to mitigate in Levy County with monoculture, and that there was some disturbance, but it still had good endemic growth attached to an area with great endemic growth, and actually got eyes on an indigo wall on the survey, which blew my mind because the last one I'd seen in the wild had been 2018. Well, 2018, the last one my buddy had found that I got there right afterwards. Mine was 2016, so I was like, so it's just yeah, the whole musical chairs aspect with it. But when I found out the details about surrounding the site I was surveying, I was like, are you kidding me? This land was bought to be mitigated and now it's being sold and mitigated again. So they're doing it with the land almost the same way they're doing it with the tortoises to some degree.
And it seems like with the ITP permits, if I'm correct, I think what they said that they were going to protect 170,000 acres, and analysis of that shows that they didn't do much more than 16,000 at most with the money that was raised from those, right? So that it seems like yeah,
Yeah.
they don't follow through on on some things with this, which is consistent.
Yep. And Watermelon Pond, the FWC WMA, that's that's right on the other side of the ridge where we are. That was bought with Gopher Tortoise mitigation money. Bell Ridge bought with mitigation money. It seems like, and that's another thing, like, for example, and I'll call FWC out on this, like, there's land that was being sold across the way from Bell Ridge, and they didn't obtain it. And it it was a great opportunity to expand the Bell Ridge ecosystem and get it more in an endemic aspect. And they didn't buy that, but yet with the incidental take permit, they were able to buy Bell Ridge, which shows that a lot of these parks, or I'd have to break down the numbers, but are bought for wide, I believe, are bought with incidental take permit money. So it was kind of hypocritical that, like, it was like, okay, well, we're not going to obtain this land here for whatever reason, um, but when with honest money, but they obtain with this with blood money. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and the economics behind it's interesting. Going to the just the current the relocation program. I can see when you think about the incentives that creates, there could be a positive there in the sense that if a developer has to pay someone thousands of dollars to relocate a tortoise, then they're going to be less. It stifles the progress and really makes them think if they want to develop that land. But then now, if you're eroding the cost of that, I mean that becomes a really initially that seems to be the case, but it also creates this demand for tortoises. I mean, if you're a person that can get access to private land, then you kind of mentioned this, Chase, I think, but maybe you could expand upon this. Like, how can people abuse the system, the relocation system, financially for to gain?
Yes, and yeah, and one thing I didn't mention going back to this is comes into play with this is like the land that FWC bought with the incidental take permit money. They can't relocate any tortoises there because it puts them in, or any state land, because it puts them in direct
Right.
financial conflict with the private trade. So it's become a money game, and that's also what it comes down to. Adult tortoises are going for 6,000 right now, and sub-adults for 3 to 4,000. And so, like when FWC denied the terrapin breeding programs, somehow thinking or coming to the conclusion it was going to strengthen black market or help, black market and not help, the wild terrapins. Um, this does the same thing. If you're an environmental consulting crew, making money off each tortoise, or you own a recipient site working with that, or environmental consulting firm, and you see a tortoise walking down the road, you don't think you're gonna that's $6,000 right there. You don't think you're gonna pull over, pop in the truck, and bring it to the site. Or let's say an area is getting developed, and an environmental consulting crew is working there, and the parcel next to that parcel that's getting developed has a good chunk of tortoises. They can illegally bucket trap. They can get those tortoises, bring them on the site, and then therefore they're making more money during the relocation. If and the recipient site's making more money as well because they're taking in the money when they're getting the tortoises, and then subadults don't count towards baseline population. So what some of these recipient side individuals will do with will be like, okay, it can have too. And I like what you stated earlier, is that how they're always, changing it. Okay, now you can become a recipient site with 40 acres, 25 acres instead of, what it historically was. And they act like, yay, we just made it easier. The public can make more money, when in the reality of it, they're making it easier and destroying more habitat by doing that. But and then so on these recipient sites, not only incorrupt in that manner, and like there's been some people that companies I've looked into myself, I won't mention, that you know they're in tortoise conservation, quote unquote, but then when you look behind the scenes, you can see infractions and that they've gotten on permits while doing Gopher Tortoise work. And then also another corrupt aspect of it, let's say you own the recipient site, you can run cattle on it, you can timber on it. So if you go to timber on that property and you get some tortoises that are killed accidentally by machinery, or just tree lands on the burrow and they can't dig out or get entombed or abandon the burrow due to the disturbance, and end up perishing due to predator or weather elements. Wow, you just opened up for more tortoises to be put on your recipient site and make more money. Like Sanibel Island, for example, when Ian came in and just hit the island significantly. Let's say, like, there a private individual had a recipient site there. Woohoo! Now I can just fill the thing back up with gophers if a lot of them were to succumb to the hurricane or whatever. So there's a lot of ways that once they turned it into a money game, it opened up a black market for it in itself. Just one that's different than your typical food source or pet geared industry that one would think on.
Right, right.
More of a
Yeah,
commercial.
people can just commercially exploit the relocation essentially and not really, it doesn't matter that the site that they put it on can be terrible for a tortoise, but you're pocketing a lot of cash in that process. So that's yeah,
Yep, and then at the same time, profit off the timber, the cattle.
right. Yeah, yeah. Well, okay.
And that goes back
Go ahead. Go, yeah.
to where I was just about the pasteurized systems and stuff, and like moving a gopher from one site potentially with a diverse vegetation to a site with less, and then there's and it's incentive for the recipient site to create even less endemic growth and more of Bahia grass, so they can put more cattle on there, therefore making more money in both avenues. So
Right, right. That's really not good. I mean, it seems like the tortoises are just facing a lot of threats from all the different angles. You have kind of a corrupt system
yes.
that doesn't work, and it's constantly being eroded. They're getting put in places that aren't conducive to their survival. It's a little bit better than just burying them alive, but that's kind of relative. And the habitat's being continuously destroyed. Now that kind of leads to, I mean, what are the things that, like in the Gopher Games, you point out the Florida 2070 project, and that's just one initiative, I guess, at looking at the future. How do we make it, yeah, how protect habitat? But what are the ways that we can sort of reverse a lot of these issues? Like, how do we? What's a better alternative to protecting the tortoises and making Florida prosperous into the future?
Letting scientists make decisions
Um,
instead of developers.
Yeah, and also bringing into play, for example, pre-COVID, the power company came on property. We have power lines going through the preserve, and I was at the job at the time, and I mean, took out all the vegetation. They collapsed. It was 7 tortoise burrows, killed 2 snakes. I got back, I was pissed. So I called them. I couldn't get them on disturbing the gopher tortoise burrows because it landed under habitat maintenance. Like, so if you go up and you spit on a gopher tortoise burrow, you kick it, you get a huge fine. But if you send a lawnmower over it, you're good to go. You're just maintaining the habitat. And so I found an indigo shed next to one of the tortoise burrows that was collapsed, and that was a federally protected species, which lands under a whole new avenue of regulations and everything else. So I pretty much contacted the power company and was like, hey, I can either get you guys a fine or come give you guys a public PowerPoint presentation, your choice. And they chose PowerPoint presentation. And pre-COVID, I was going to 2 different power companies bringing snakes, educating them on the species they're going to come in contact with. This is what a burrow looks like. Drive around it. Don't drive over it. By the end of the meeting, they were holding the snakes, loving it. A big thing that I was working on getting to that I didn't, simply due to once again COVID and not quite jumping back on the bandwagon yet, was limiting herbicide usage. They came back on and just sprayed everything, pawpaw, rupus, instead of selective spraying and only hitting the species that actually jeopardize the the wires due to the height of turkey oak, pine trees. And if I wanted to work with those organizations, still want to and planning on it, to do selective spraying where they leave a lot of the browsing grazing material there and just focus on the species that will jeopardize the lines. And that way it works significantly for both parties. The company saving a boatload of money on herbicide usage, if you think about that statewide, and then a lot of the animals that utilize that area, which, like, in some of these ecosystems, that's the only open canopy within those areas, are they have the grazing and browsing material and can sustain as well. We've been very disconnected from nature with the advancement of technology. And don't get me wrong, I love my TV shows, video games, they're incredible, but at the same time we can't also forget about the other incredible. And I think through education and kind of just entrepreneurs and just not from the animal realm. I mean, I'd say easily 50% of some of my top tier volunteers or supporters have been people from society that just want to help. Sometimes the state, the government, they don't usually give opportunity. If they do, it's very minimal. And a lot of these private facilities are so stressed with either finding funding or completing mission, that they don't have the time to open up massive amounts of volunteer opportunities or this and that. So I think that it's a whole, like, as Brent said earlier, just a whole, not dismantling, but just rethinking and engaging more, from whether it be the church on, or not even church, just let's say religious establishment on the corner, to your CVS or Walgreens, that is going to get involved, and also your private individuals. I think a huge success can be in homeowners associations. I mean, I've never gotten along with any homeowner association within me being within that neighborhood. I like my grass over 6 inches, and so if people are allowed to and are educated to keep have endemic growth and create these corridor systems within these neighborhoods, and the people be educated not to kill the snakes, or why these animals are important, and actually establish like a connection to the animals through just sitting on the porch through observation, or interaction without obviously disturbance to a significant degree of the animal in the wild and functionality. That's where a lot of the difference is going to lie too, is just like getting it's like I call it being institutionalized in society, like this mowing the grass, like, and it makes more like let's say you have 15 acres and you mow 10 of it. How much gas, time of your life is going into that, when you can restore it to an endemic state and get all that time and money back.
Right. It's like win-win. I mean,
Sorry, I go on rants all the time.
this is the place to do it. Yeah, that's great. Like the power company example is great because it's just these win-win
Yes.
solutions. Like looking for these win-win solutions, right? People have to benefit to have incentive to do something, and we love these animals. And I mean, there's so much. Like it is unfortunate it becomes a political debate so much, because I think that that it is a universal thing. They benefit all of us, but a lot of times the narrative is that there's one side. People want to preserve the environment, but it isn't conducive to human prosperity. But it is. I mean, these animals, they withhold the ecosystem, and we need to convince everyone of that, because it is just a human problem that we have with the
Yes.
tortoises and just biodiversity loss in general. So like the win-win is great, and like doing things like multimedia videography, like Gopher Games is the thing. Like Brent, you talked about this. I'd be curious to hear a little more. Like having scientists in positions where we need scientists, by making films like this, I think that you create some thrust and impetus to have people kind of work to make those changes happen, because you can say that, but you actually need some inertia to do it. I mean, like, how do we get scientists in those positions?
Well, if it's cool with you, I'll go back to the House Joint Resolution, the bill that I put in. Um, this bill, if it goes through, it will revolutionize the FWC and how we look at nature in Florida. And I pulled it up real quick. So it goes from 7 to 9 positions, and one of them is, let's see, the Department of Agriculture will put two, will actually elect two of them. So currently the governor just picks 7 people, and that's the people that make it happen. They're not qualified. So the first two will be chosen by the Department of Agriculture, either a rancher or farmer. Um, Actually, 2 ranchers or farmers, but there are stipulations as to what they have on their land. And then the DEP, the Environmental Protection in Florida, will choose a hunter or angler, and a conservationist who has at least 4 years been a major part of a nonprofit that does wildlife conservation. Another one is the Department of Air and Water Pollution Control will choose a scientist, and then the governor actually chooses the last 4. One's a local official from a large county, one's a local official from a very small county, one's a scientist who is accredited in forestry, silviculture, forest management, the like. Another scientist, let's see, another scientist, and then another scientist. Yeah, so uh, I mean, I don't think we should strip away everything in the FWC and just say, here's a million scientists, go ahead and do this. Because the point here isn't to only represent what we want or to only represent what developers want. It's to develop, I mean, there's 22 million people in Florida, and some of them are in agriculture. Some of them are hunters and fishers. They do it for a living. Some of them are recreation. They do it for a living. Some of them, like outdoor recreation, is the largest thing that we have in Florida as far as GDP. Like it's the largest amount of cash that comes into Florida is outdoor recreation, and so we need to protect it, but we also need to allow people to do silviculture, like grow trees, grow crops. So this new bill will obviously, we're going to workshop it. It will have multiple drafts, but at the moment, it takes developers and throws them out the window and says, as a whole, everybody needs a hand in this cookie jar because we all need to work together to make sure that it's sustainable. Um, I'm going to randomly throw this in here. I think we need to add a representative of the indigenous people in Florida because they have been just historically, railroaded and not gotten a say in anything that happens. So we need that as well. Um, but yeah, simply put, the scientists need to make the major decisions. And if we have a board that isn't only scientists but is majority scientists, they are then working for the public's interest and the interest of the tortoises and whatnot. So that was my solution. I'm sure it'll get ripped apart come Tuesday. The first committee in the House takes a look at it, and then there's two others to follow. I'm sure it'll get shredded to pieces. But at the moment, it's our first attempt to be like, this hasn't worked since 1972. Let's try something new, and that something new is to make sure these people are qualified, and that they actually have the environment in the back of their mind while they're making decisions.
Yeah, right. Oh, Chase, go ahead.
And I think um like what you were saying before, like um I the importance of the natural world and the importance that it has to do with our future sustainability currently, you name it, is not up for debate. It's only been strengthened over time, and and I think I brought this up, last time, you know, if you had a world vote 70 years ago, who would want every venomous creature off this planet? Probably 98, 99% of the world would raise their hand, correct? And now look at the medical applications we're coming up with, just not through, snake venom, but black widow venom. I mean, it's incredible. It's incredible. And you would think with the gopher tortoises, you know the state would be riddling them throughout the state, because being the keystone species they are, that would help all the other species that are in decline and hurting, therefore saving the state money down the road instead of not doing that. And then as population declines, it's going to cost the state more money down the road than it would have if they would have acted. And it always seems like that. We never act when something's on the downward spiral. We always act like when it gets there, oh, now we have to do something instead of doing something before it had to get to that state, and so with new technology we don't even have access to or won't for 30 more years. I mean, the natural world is it's a 911 right now, and how we get people involved is, it's not only the people but the corporations, the companies, but I think as a whole, we need to come back to it, to some degree in every single field, and realm of society.
Would you guys say that this recent bill is kind of the result of some? I've noticed in the past maybe year or so, there's been a lot more on social media, and you guys have brought this up today. You think it's a result of that pressure?
Yes, say that again.
Yeah, just this recent bill that's been proposed, the 1625, the HJR. Do you think that that is a result of the pressures from that have been on social media? I think that it's been more the other guy. You guys can agree, disagree, but I feel like I've been seeing a lot more like shorts and reels and things like that about Florida legislature. Maybe that's just coming to me, but you think this bill is a result of that pressure?
No, this bill is a result of me writing it.
Yep,
I wrote
that
it.
man
Oh,
right there. Yep, yep.
Um,
Brent, yeah, he through and through. Brent did the legwork with the bill, 100%. I think that it has a chance of getting looked at a hell of a lot more due to that. But yeah, Brent
yeah,
all the
the
way.
social media stuff that you've seen, especially the split oak one, and there's just been many over the last 6 to 12 months. That's why I thought now is the good time to do this, because we've had like there was already a momentum going into this. People started to learn more about the FWC and the issues we're having. And then we released Gopher Tortoise, or we released this documentary on Gopher Tortoise Day last year, and then followed it up with the petition. The petition got a couple thousand signatures, but then it started to get more and more and more as people started to see these issues come up, like this, like the split oak issue. And me and multiple other conservation organizations started to focus on that to try to get people to pay more attention.
And I like to give a shout out to like the Gopher Tortoise Facebook groups. They are very proactive, and I think that these Gopher Tortoise Facebook groups really did a great job at uniting a lot of the people that care out there, but also bringing public awareness to how, how much it's an issue. Because Brent said this earlier, when you scroll down some of those pages, like, my gosh, just destruction after destruction after destruction. And that's another thing too, I think, is that you know, we're kind of at that point. One of the regulations they took away, um, that we stated within the documentary, was, the amendment they made was, to disregard the Gopher Tortoise guidelines. You could one of the things they waived is you can take a tortoise over 100 miles from where it originally came from. And how sad is that? As if an animal that can survive on 1 acre, or two can survive on 2 acres, allegedly. But once again, I say that because you got to bring in the years of drought, other herbivores, also putting pressure on the vegetation within that acreage and stuff that isn't brought into play. But that's sad that they had to drop that under 100-mile regulation. So I think that we're just there. We're always talking about the mass extinction and this and that, and especially in Florida, it's make it or break it. It's and I think that tells you right there that you have to, when they drop that regulation, that, or you have to now, that you can now take this animal over 100 miles that can survive on an acre. That's pretty bad.
And that's
Right.
another thing that you wouldn't know. Like your average person has no idea. So it looks like they're making changes to make things better, but in reality they're not. And you asked why the petition, or sorry, why the bill came out. Because people saw the documentary and are constantly asking me, what do we do next? What do we do next? And since that documentary came out, I don't know about you, Chase, but I've gotten 2 to 3 people at least per month reaching out on Instagram or Facebook and saying, I've watched developers just, go right over a Gopher tortoise hole in my backyard. I don't know what to do. What do I do? And
Yep.
that's the problem is people have no idea that there's nothing you can do to an extent because of the corruption.
Yep.
So I
And,
I worked on that bill, and then I can't take all credit for it. Dr. Escamani and her team worked on it as well after I sent it their way. But that's what we want to do. And all of this public pressure that you were talking about, that I think is what's going to get the bill passed, or at least what's to allow it to advance the conversation. This conversation that we're having on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, the legislators don't give a shit about it. They're not plugged in. They don't care. But they will be once we start tagging Rodney Barreto in dozens and dozens of Instagram posts saying, you need to resign, you need to resign. I just posted one before this podcast. And he can't miss it now. And with all of that pressure and people paying attention, we just took this conversation between us, like people like us who care and understand what's going on, straight to the legislator. They cannot ignore us anymore. This is hitting next week, it's hitting 3 different committees. So we're bringing that
and
fight to them in Tallahassee.
yeah, and if you even notice how the commission is trying to rebuttal this, they just came out with a promotional video on Rodney Barreto. Congratulations. And read the comments. That tells you in itself where the people, that tells you in itself where the people are at. Read the comments. Go on their Facebook group, or and go when they drop their Gopher Tortoise Day post. Read the comments. Read last year when we dropped the documentary. Read the comments. That tells you where the people are at. And yeah, as Brent said before, it seems like they're just not interested in what the people have to say. And during the water state, you know Ryan Smart, correct, Brent?
Yeah, Ryan Smart.
Yeah, shout out to Ryan, incredible conservationist as well, and he stated the same thing. Did they even read the letters? And I think across the board in the animal, especially wildlife, conservation realm, everybody's at the same point of just like, what do you guys, what are you guys doing? When is the change going to occur, so we can actually start not only, not only just maintaining the species, but restoring and gaining functionality back. And we actually see multiple indigos or pine snakes. And I'm once again just being a herp person, or like, where it just has that functional state that it historically did, from avian to herp to mammal, and the whole 9 yards.
And you know what? To prove that this social media thing works, I public records requested documents discussing it, and they are discussing it. I couldn't get anything juicy, like nothing really amazing that you could throw on there, and it's damning to them. But they definitely have seen what we're doing, and I might jump back on again and see if I can get more stuff because it's been really ramping up the last few weeks. But uh, yeah, it won't change through conventional means because of corruption, but we can make change with positive sentiment. And I want to tear down that building in Tallahassee and put it up with a completely new group of people who can really make a difference.
Right. Well, something. I mean, that's incredible that you wrote this piece of legislation, or hopefully to be that, Brent. And I mean, that. What kind of work does that take? Because this ties into like what people can do as an individual to make a difference. I mean, that kind of thing, proposing, um, reform, that kind of thing. What did it take to write that? And can anyone do that sort of thing? And what's the process?
Oh, I mean, I'll say it's not easy to write in legalese, but to be honest, you don't have to do anything impressive. Like I formatted, so I came up with what I thought would be best, and I talked to other people and thought like, what do we think is going to be the best for this, and and I decided what my framework would be, and then I got on the internet and I looked at other bills, and I actually uh, I went to New Mexico's site, and they're doing some reformation on the way that they run their Fish and Wildlife Commission. And I looked at theirs and I was like, like we need that. That's what we need. And so I took some of the language from theirs and said like, fit it into my framework. And then I used some clever Googling and AI stuff to like make sure that it looked good. But when I sent it to Dr. Esmani's team, it didn't need to look like a bill because they know how to write a bill. And so they can take whatever your ideas are. I think the hardest part of getting a bill like that in is knowing who to talk to and then finding the time to make them listen. Um, Dr. Escamani had already seen my previous documentary, and I'd met her in person for it. And I knew, like, from that short conversation that she was hardcore conservation, and I've been following her for a while online. And so I knew she was the right person. And so I just sent her team a message, and they responded within an hour and were like, hey, let's set up a meeting. So I've had, half a dozen or more just meetings, very short 20-minute meetings with her via Zoom. And that's what it takes. You just got to keep talking to them and let them know that this is important. And if you have to give them examples, like I could have just pulled a whole bunch of comments like Chase was talking about, say, hey, this is from Facebook. People are watching. Can we work on this? So yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of different ways you can do that. But for me, I just happen to know one person who I trusted and we made it happen.
That's awesome. I mean, that is like a huge thing to do that I think is daunting to a lot of people, but just to see, that you took the time to do that and that anyone can do it is it's like a huge thing to lead by example. I mean, that's really amazing. Well, yeah, maybe we could sort of wind down with some general questions about Gopher Games, Gopher Tortoises. I'm curious, um, for you guys, what were some of the things in the process of making the film that stood out to you that maybe counterintuitive, shocking facts you learned? I mean, what struck you the most?
I think the big one for me is just like people wanted to be a part of it so badly. And I mean, that blew my mind. Chase was the first one to be like, we've been trying for years to find an outlet to get this message out there. Are you going to do that? You're going to do that? Well, let's go. And does it. Probably over 100 other people jumped in via word of mouth and like, we got to do this too. That was crazy. That was wild. And people love the springs, but even for the springs, for my documentary and that one, I did not have the amount of public support reaching out like this. Like people care about gopher tortoises and not scientists. It's everybody who has them in their backyard, who sees them on their walk. Like people, it was overwhelming and humbling to say, and I can honestly say that this documentary was not made by us. It was made by hundreds of people who gave input, whether or not I was asking for it. They wanted to be a part of it. And so that blew my mind and that was awesome.
That's awesome. How about you, Chase? What were the things that stood out the most?
Uh, I guess kind of recognizing, like we were talking about before, like it seemed like with the Installment of the Endangered Species Act, we didn't turn it around, but we were going a better direction. Uh, at some point than we historically were, and animal species were bouncing back up, and national parks were being created, and then whatever happened, we started to go the opposite direction. And I feel like it was the same thing with the gopher tortoises here. Like, with getting them protected, all the way from the 1980s to stop, pouring gasoline down the burrows for the rattlesnake roundups to flush out the rattlesnakes and stuff, which was a great implementation. And then to like the relocation guidelines, to the upgraded relocation guidelines. Now you have to relocate the hatchlings, because historically when they started you didn't have to relocate the hatchlings. I believe in the subadults, because their survival rate was so low, it didn't matter. It didn't, but now they not only relocate the hatchling tortoises, and once again, if they get consumed, they get consumed. Most likely they do. That's just the way it works. But then that's how nature works. It becomes a food item for something, and it serves its purpose. And now they're even relocating the nest as well. So but then and then to a complete just start running in the other direction by nixing the 100-mile regulation, and to you name it, improving the guidelines, as they would say, when you're really just making it easier for development to run rampant.
Right. Yeah,
And
it is. Oh, go ahead.
and I like tortoises because I talk fast, I move fast. They force me to move slow, and I think that's a great. It's like that in Florida. Why are we always in the fast lane? Why do we always have to go, 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 progress, progress, progress? And I think, like, society in general, Florida especially, can take a good message from the tortoise. Just like, it's okay to move at a slow pace. It doesn't have to be this continuous, just boom, boom, boom. So it's not like, necessarily like we hate this developers. I have friends that are developers. I give us a shout out all the time with Negosi, who's currently in for biological diversity, with the feds. That he was a developer that gave back and did tremendous stuff. But I think at this fast rate, with a utter, just lack of respect or even acknowledgement of the other community that comes with it.
Right. Right. Well, something else that we didn't touch on this yet, but it just kind of came to. I'm curious. I mean, why won't for the eastern gopher tortoises? Why won't the U.S. Fish and Wildlife protect them? That seems like an issue that's kind of unrelated to the state, but maybe Florida has some say in that. I mean, why? It seems like there's a lot of good evidence that they should be.
Yeah, it's wild. It was like what, Chase, 270 something pages
Yeah, it's
showing.
yeah, it's kind of like what they did. Explain this, like with the mountain lion, the parent. They just were like, okay, we're going to protect it, but we're going to protect the west, the mountain lion, not the panther, and they protected, I think, all the mountain lions on the west coast, but didn't give any protections to any of the mountain lions on the east coast. And we've inhabited this land for so long. If you pull up a map of federal protected land, the East Coast has, the Everglades is the largest, obviously, but it's just little blips on the East Coast when the West Coast is riddled and quote unquote protected land. So I think it would be a lot more expensive, and it would be a lot harder to protect them on the East Coast.
Interesting. So financial, yeah, right, right.
Mm.
And there are still, I mean, it's sizable number, like 100,000, 90,000 tortoises. So maybe there's, but the trajectory is just like there was a million a few decades ago. So
Yes,
that,
and there
that
was.
does.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
There was currently a company, and they had an objective to. I don't want to give them any, awareness or anything like that, but like their initiative in the next 10 years was to relocate 50,000 gopher tortoises. And that
That's
shows
insane.
you at the, once again, projections there. And that was just one company.
Yeah. And just not doing anything that really is helping, that's not, yeah. And that's more than half the population, we think, total in the East. I
There
mean,
you
that,
go.
yeah. That's it's scary for sure. I'm just on sort of something related to what we talked about earlier with the film. Brent, I mean, the Project Paradise Film Fund, I think they helped your first documentary, and I'm
Mhm.
curious, like, how did you get involved with that program, and how do we? Something that I think all of us are running into now is like, how do we fund a lot of our research and our projects, and how do you become a creative fundraiser?
Oh God, I hate fundraising so much. So I found,
Impossible.
yeah, the um, Project Paradise was brand new. It was a nonprofit that started that year that I found it, just specifically to raise money to fund documentaries like this, short form documentaries. And it was just, I saw an advertisement on Instagram and I applied and I got it. So that one was easy, and they still do it. I think they still fund two or three per year. So look them up online. YouTube, you can actually see my documentary for free too, under their name. And the Water State, not Gopher Games. You can see the Water State on there. I think the way we got got creative was just to reach out to people that we knew loved tortoises we already knew. And I think so GoFundMe was a good idea. I think honestly, the way that technology is going, it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to have better and better tech. So you just buy a nice camera, buy a good microphone for it, a few $100s, and then you can film it yourself. So we got lucky on the second documentary, and people donated their time, like professionals donated their time because they did care about the tortoises. But I don't know, fundraising is rough. If you have the ability, grant writing is a big one. And you can just Google National Geographic has a fund for young filmmakers or for new filmmakers. There's tons of different companies that will have these funds that not necessarily grants, but you can apply with your idea and see if they'll pay for it. There's tons of ways you can get money, but to be honest, it's not easy and it sucks. I hate it so much, and I am so grateful to Chase for him reaching out to all of his friends that he's had for a decade plus, and for them funding it. But here's the two different ways I think are important to think about it. You can get a big whale that's going to fund the whole thing, either a grant, an organization, or just a rich person who believes in what you're doing. Or you can do what Chase did and reach out to a bunch of small people. You guys know this, right? Reptile people typically don't have a lot of money, and you can't really fundraise that well. But if you can get 5,000 of them that care, then you can make the money. So it's really hard. It is not easy at all. But I don't know if you have any tips, Chase, that I don't know about, but it sucks.
Yeah, like Path of the Panther, incredible documentary. But when you have Disney backing something, you're golden, baby. You have the money, and so it was a lot of time spent on the phone, and not just like the money. Most people right off the bat, no problem. Were like, yeah, 100%, and they cared. But then I'm on the phone, hey, how's life? And that's another 20-30 minutes right there. So yeah, the volunteers hated me for a little bit because I was like MIA, just like trying to make this happen. When I going back at the beginning of this, when I said hurricane, Brent had to rush through the state to get all these interviews because what hurricane, it was Ian, I believe, wasn't it, that we were racing, you were racing against?
Yep.
And so like we didn't have the funding for a second trip, so like it was yeah, if you're a small company, those little things matter, unlike named organization that's well renowned, or a private individual with money, or just like, okay, well, we'll just go 2 weeks from now or something like that, because Brent had the interviews lined up and everything else, and so yeah, a lot of time on the phone. And I think also people didn't know what the documentary was. Gopher Games, the title is perfect. Like, I think the title is great, but what is that? And we explained it, what it is. It's Gopher Games. But if you have like um a documentary that's like I don't know, maybe like saving sea otters or something like that, people are going to be like, okay, I'm going to donate to that, because they're ultimately going to know that it's about saving sea otters without having to click on a link to watch a trailer or something like that, because when if you type Gopher Games in the Google, there's, I don't know, or even YouTube, there's always this other company that pops up, and I still to this day have no idea what they have to do with. But it's so I think it's also kind of, if you launch one of these GoFundMe's, and that's also a thing. If you have a lot of money, you could put a lot of money into advertising on GoFundMe or YouTube or this or that to bring in that income, as well. So with us not having that money to throw at the advertising aspect to bump up the views on the people are going to have eyes on the petition or eyes on this documentary, Gopher Games itself. That is a huge plus as well. Sorry, rant number 89.
Those trailers were helpful though. Like
Yes.
Though I got tens of thousands of views on those trailers, the 3 of them that I had, and that brought in, I'm sure, quite a bit of money.
Well, that's great advice. And like, yeah, right. There's not one magic bullet for it. There's a lot of
Yeah.
different ways to go about it, and it's project dependent, right? I'm curious for you guys both. I mean, what were the what are the most memorable adventures in creating this film? And did you have any? I mean, you're working in Florida. We've talked to people in the past that have some harrowing experiences. It sounds like a lot of this was probably more tame, but I'm curious. I mean, what are the most memorable things from putting together the film?
When Chase handed me an indigo snake while I was in my car, and he said, "Hold this for me," and then he got in his truck, and we drove 5 minutes down the road to find the Gopher Tortoises where we were gonna film. And I was like, "I have an endangered species on my hand, and I'm just driving down this dirt road with 2 guys next to me with these massive black magic cameras filming me." I'm like, "What? What is my life right now?" It was pretty cool.
That's awesome. Chase, how about you?
Um, yeah, seeing people come together to make this thing happen was a big one. Um, yeah, what was the original question again?
Just what the best adventures,
Okay,
from
best
from
adventure.
yeah.
That's okay. The word, yeah. Seeing all this come together, and the best adventure, like meeting up with Brent. I would say because like I love that photo. I don't know if you guys have seen it. We can send you guys later of all of us in front of the Eastern Diamondback, Brent, and like I look back on that and just everything that's happened since then. This was very uncharted waters for myself. I mean, I've been in pretty much no documentaries prior to this one in the animal realm, and like, it's it was or in any it was any realm. It was uncharted waters. So like Brent had more experience with this and stuff, so it was just the whole thing of like every single door we opened was an experience that I've never experienced before, or a new realm that I had to gain knowledge in, and even the so it was just the whole journey itself from start to finish. There were good times, there were bad times. It was truly a journey, and the whole thing in itself, and I would say 100%.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Well, maybe we can just kind of finish off with I mean, I'm curious, like what do you guys think this I mean, the tortoises are not in a good place, but do you think that it's realistic to that the state of Florida can kind of reverse the tide for the tortoises?
Y- y- um,
I don't know.
yes, is there going to be a lot more genetics lost? Yes, I believe so. Another good thing is in today's world, we also have a lot of technology that does great things for conservation. So, when let's say we get to a turnaround point, um, um, you know, I we will still have hopefully the numbers to restore a lot of these areas if it comes to that point. I think it's just not also what like going back a little bit, it's just not about the Gopher Tortoise. Gopher Games isn't just about the Gopher Tortoise, because realistically, if those FWC commissioners, do not either start supporting wildlife to the degree that it needs to be, or put people in there to actually support wildlife, it doesn't matter what initiative you're doing, what conservation organization you're a part of, whether you work once again with herps, avian, mammals, marine life. At the end of the day, we're all going to be brick walled. So I think that that's what's going to kind of I'm hoping occur down the road here, that we're all going to, um, all the realms are just going to be to the point where like enough's enough, and kind of create some unity and push as a unit together to try to create a better future, that almost, the tribal kind of setting that it currently is now. And not tribal because of drama, but just, I go out to Herp and, there's a burger there. We'll have a minute conversation, but it's a lot of people within their realms and stuff. And the communication does need to get better, for that unity to occur down the road here. And that's why I brought these Gopher Tortoise Facebook groups, because it seemed like they did a great job at doing that. And they somehow started kind of working together behind the scenes together, and they kind of created a community in themselves when they allowed that platform to be created. And once again, I think that they got some views because, like when, shout out to Robert, like in definitely like saving the Gopher Tortoise, I believe, or I forget what the pace uh, yell at me, for saving Florida's Gopher Tortoise or saving the Gopher Tortoise. I think that title right there, when you're scrolling down Facebook, it's like boom. If you saw Gopher Game films or whatever, you wouldn't even know that's related to Gopher Tortoises, because it's not. It that title isn't laid out like that.
Right, right. Brent, how about
It,
you? I mean, what? Oh, go ahead. Was someone
no,
saying
no,
something?
no. I was just gonna say, so like that's these Gopher Tortoise groups. They grew and they really, created that community in itself there that needs to kind of occur. And not saying that there's other, groups that have that community too as well. We were just, and those individuals were just thankful enough for a person like Brent to come along to do a documentary that touched on this, that allowed people to run with it, to reach the public and to be noticed.
Yeah, right. Like you said early on, Chase. I mean, this is a subject that it's like it's not like whales. It's not the sexy megafauna, but it's great to focus on the stuff that doesn't get as much attention, like the gopher tortoises. Brent, how about you? I mean, do you think that it's realistic that the tortoises don't go extinct, or at least get depleted?
Oh man, I don't think we'll lose them, but I'll say, um, if I know anything about humans, or at least American humans, sorry, he's getting a little bit cabin fever. Give me 10 minutes, buddy. Um, if I know anything about humans, it's that we'll often out of sight, out of mind it until it's too late, or at least until it's so dire that it cannot be ignored. And I think we're getting to that point. I think that's why so many people are pissed off with the FWC right now, is because it's so evident everywhere you go that there's no land that's safe from being developed, and none is being done sustainably. So I think it'll get pretty bad. If this bill doesn't pass, I think it'll get really bad. But I don't think it's fair to throw in the towel this early, or ever, to be honest. Because if once we decide that it's not going to happen, or that it's not likely to happen, we're going to give up. And it takes people like us keeping this conversation going for people to continue to pay attention and then continue to make change. So I don't. I'm I definitely I have a lot of positivity that the change will be made. I do not have a lot of positivity that it won't get really bad before the change that we need is made, if that makes sense.
And if I
Yeah.
could bring up real fast too, like captive breeding, like AZA stud books, if if we start getting captive populations, security, populations, for gopher tortoises and many, many, many other species out there, then it allows us to hold on to that hope, because with restoration, at least we can have the species to pluck from captive state to get them back in the wild. Because it's very depressing when you're like, okay, this thing's extinct in the wild. But there's only like 15, 20 left in captivity. Like, I work with the radiated tortoises and, breed radiateds and stuff. And yes, they're a critically endangered species in the wild, but in captivity, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And that's comforting, because, like, once Madagascar establishes corridor systems and, replenishes hopefully some of their wild areas, we have the individuals to repopulate, so it doesn't make it quite as a depressing situation.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess just our last, just to finish off with, I mean, you guys are been successful in a variety of fields. So I'm just curious, like as students, what's a piece of advice that you would give to someone looking to make turtle work a career?
Um is take advantage of every not every opportunity, of course, like, don't, but take advantage of the opportunities. I see it, assistant curator at the Santa Fe Teaching Zoo, and just from the preserve, and I co-founded the Rattlesnake Conservancy with Tony, and we saw a lot of volunteer students. Myself, when I was going through school, they don't want to go up and talk to this person because they don't want to say something, inaccurate or whatever. Like when it comes to the animal realm, we're all dumb. I mean, it's so vast that and so complex and incredible that we can spend our whole lives focusing on it and still only comprehend a small, minute aspect of it. So, take advantage of. I know this Sunday. I don't know, Jack, if you're going, there's a turtle dive, turtle survey with Jerry Johnson and stuff, and get
I'll be
involved
there.
in projects like that, restoration projects with various conservation organizations in your local area, or if there's not one, touch base with the Sierra Club, or start one. One can start one themselves, but for the students and stuff, just networking, knowledge is. I tell this to all the volunteers all the time. Knowledge is power, and networking is key. And there's so much truth to that. And I'm not an educated man within the education realm, really. I mean, to some degree, 100%. I love the teaching zoo. I'm a graduate of it. It taught me a lot. Prior to that, I didn't really focus too much in school, but if it's animal geared, I read it, I watch it. I've read 2,000 documentaries. Always reading animal articles and talking to folks. And so I just kind of I'm passion. That's how I got to where I was today, was just taking advantage of opportunity, and just not doing it in the classroom, but diving into it on my own personal time and making it life.
I'll keep my answer super short because
Yeah,
Bentley,
sorry.
Bentley needs to go to the bathroom. Be like Jack. That's what I'd say. I've seen Jack. I met you underwater as you're
Yeah, I
floating
remember
down the
that.
river. Really, just it's just
That
do
was
what
crazy.
you want to do. You don't need permission from anybody, right? Like I did a documentary in the springs, and now I know a crap ton more than most people about springs. Same thing with turtles, except when I'm talking to people like you, I feel like I don't know anything at all. But I know a crap ton about turtles. Like nobody gave me permission to do that. You can be an expert in something that you are passionate about without a certificate. So jump in the water, catch the turtles. Well, make sure you're doing it legally, but do what you want to do, and then go get a degree while you're doing that to allow you to do it even more. So, yeah, don't ask permission. Just make it happen.
That's awesome. We'll
I
take
like that.
Yeah, that's good.
amazing. I like the all of us in the animal world are dumb. I like that quote. That's a good one, because there's so much ego that gets built up sometimes,
Oh,
and it's like,
geez.
yeah,
Yeah.
you just got to remind yourself, like,
If
we
I
don't
hear a
really
word that I don't know, I ask them what it is, what it means. You know what I mean? It's I did. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but it's a big thing I've noted in the animal field.
Yeah, well, that's all. Thanks, guys. We like to finish off. I know, Brent, you've got you may have to head out here, but we like to finish it off with a quick round of turtle trivia. I don't know if you guys have some random turtle facts you want to throw at us and see if we can answer.
Oh man, I don't think I'm the person to do this. I think I know far less than all of you when it comes to Chelonians.
Do you guys want to take a question? We could throw one your way.
No, I'll toss one at you, but I'll make it a regulation question.
Oh,
Ooh.
Let me think for a second. So, what are two different relocation permits you can achieve for the Gopher Tortoise?
that's a good question. I know that there's a relocation permitting process. I can't say I've looked into it further than that. I mean, the ITP doesn't count for that, obviously, but
Yeah, you're leaving them in place.
are you looking for the
You
name?
got
Like,
me.
are there
Yeah.
names?
Yep.
Okay. Like a private and public land? I mean, does it? I don't know.
So like there can be like a conservation, permit or a on-site permit. So
Mm.
yeah, and once again, I won't dive down into those. We'll be here for another hour. The Gopher Tortoise guidelines are it's in depth in itself. If you ever get a chance to pull it up and look at it, so
That's interesting. That is good to know.
I did come up with one.
You've got one?
Yeah. How long can a gopher tortoise live underground once entombed before it's dead?
That's a good
Is
one.
it about 6 months to a year?
Yeah, we have actual evidence that they can survive up to a year.
yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
That's
I think
crazy.
was it Brent a year
That's
and a
all.
month, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, just
We
over.
didn't like personally bury one. This is through another person that didn't personally bury the other one. They just were able to get within that burrow after hearing about it, and the thing was barely, but still alive.
Jeez.
Yeah, I was about to ask for the details of that. So, like after a year and a month, the tortoise was still alive down there.
I believe that
Like-
it was a year and a month. Am I correct, Brent?
Yeah, and along the way of making this documentary, I have tons of people tell me stories about these kinds of things. And the one person that told me this story is a very credible source, and they're like,
Yes.
"Yeah, I personally pulled that tortoise out after I've been tracking it for a long time." And yeah, they did bring it back to life, like bring it back to good health. But yeah, it was
Oh, they did.
emaciated and awful. Probably
That's
pretty
messed up.
tortoise going in there,
Jeez. Turtles are too tough for their own good
right?
sometimes.
Wild.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. I mean that's really scary. It's just that's something. I mean, the pavement you could be walking on could be covering a tortoise that's alive and just it's
Yeah.
desiccating.
And it's legal sometimes. It's legal.
Yeah. Well, I think that's probably a good place we can end off now. But I mean, thank you guys for joining us tonight. That was a really great conversation. I think however we can help support Gopher Games and the initiative, I think we want to do that. But yeah, I'll just open the floor to you guys if there's anything you want to finish off on.
There's a petition going. We didn't even talk on the petition, Brent. there's a petition going around right now to reform the FWC, and it's next Tuesday. Is it, Brent? You said, or the petitions that's going on for a while. That's the actual bill. So yeah, but also yeah. So there's a bill going. That bill Brent created to reform the FWC, but there's a petition going around for that bill. And yeah, so if anybody watching this would like to, if you just type in Google Gopher Tortoise FWC petition, or Gopher Games FWC petition, it will pop right up, and give it a sign, and then if you agree, that would be fantastic. And thank you guys so much for having us come on too.
Yeah, it was a lot.
That petition, when does it? Because this may be a little before it gets out, but I could expedite it if it's necessary. Like, when is the petition close?
The petition is open-ended. It's really just a way for us to send it to lawmakers and be like, "Hey, look, a lot of people care about this." And it actually goes every time there's a milestone, it sends an email to Ron DeSantis directly to him.
Oh,
So
man.
it sent one to him recently when we passed 5,000, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just a way. It's just a way for us to easily be like, "Look, people are paying attention," and it's open-ended.
It stops when they reform.
Yeah. Yep. I'll
Yeah.
shut it down once we win.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. This is great conversation. I've learned a lot. I think I speak for everyone, I think, but yeah.
Thank you for all you guys have done too.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you guys.
Good ride.
Yeah.
All right.
So, but thank you so much, and have a good rest of your evening.
Yeah. Ethan, were you saying something? Or
Oh, yeah, I was just saying thank you to Brent and Chase for all they've done.
awesome. Cool.
Thanks
All
for
right.
having
Well,
me. It was fun.
Appreciate the kind words.
we'll see everyone in the next one.
All right. Good night, gentlemen.